Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going over my top 32 ranked wide receivers for week number 4 of the 2022 fantasy football season. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. And if you do want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at Notorious FNTSY. I would also like to ask that if you guys have any questions revolving around week number 4 of the 2022 fantasy football season, that you please make sure to ask down below in the comment section. I love talking to you guys down there. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 4 wide receiver rankings. We begin with wide receivers 1 through 8, headlined by Stefon Diggs, the Buffalo Bills, going up against the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore this week. Now, the reason why I like Stefon Diggs so much and why he is my number 1 ranked wide receiver is because I love this matchup up against the Baltimore Ravens. The Baltimore Ravens defense this year, putting it lightly, has been dog shit. And I really do believe that the Buffalo Bills have one of the best offenses in the NFL. And when you have a great offense like the Buffalo Bills going up against a defense that has the tendency to get plowed, I think Stefon Diggs could have a huge game. Plus, the Baltimore Ravens also have a good offense, so they are going to push the Buffalo Bills to score even more points. So I believe this is going to be the highest scoring matchup of the week right now. The Vegas sportsbooks agree with that because this is the highest projected point total on the week. I love Stefon Diggs here. He's already been the number 1 wide receiver in half PPR once this season in week number 2 up against the Les Titans, the Tennessee Titans. He was the wide receiver 6 in half PPR up against the Rams, up against the Miami Dolphins in week number 3. He kind of shit the bed, not because he wasn't targeted. He had 11 targets, but because the Miami Dolphins defense did not allow him to go over top and make those big chunk plays. We saw the Ravens get absolutely fisted by Tyreek Hill 2 weeks ago going over the top. I really do believe Stefon Diggs gets it done easily this week. My number 2 wide receiver is Cooper Kupp of the LA Rams going up against the San Francisco 49ers. Now, obviously, this is going to be a tougher matchup for the LA Rams, but even in tougher matchups, for instance, when they get destroyed by the Buffalo Bills in week number 1, we see Cooper Kupp get 15 targets, 13 receptions, 128 receiving yards, 1 touchdown, 25 half PPR points, and he's the number 2 wide receiver on the week. Even in bad matchups, Matthew Stafford force feeds the ball to Cooper Kupp. He has scored a touchdown, at least 1 touchdown in every game, 1 touchdown in week 1, 2 touchdowns in week 2 up against Atlanta, and 1 touchdown last week up against the Arizona Cardinals. Again, while this is a tougher matchup, Cooper Kupp always gets it done. At number 3, we got Justin Jefferson, the gritty man himself of the Minnesota Vikings, going up against the New Orleans Saints on Sunday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in London. I know everyone cannot wait to get up to watch Andy Dalton versus Kirk Cousins at 9:30 a.m. That's exactly what you needed in the morning. So Justin Jefferson, kind of a rocky start to the season, right? In week number 1, this guy eviscerates the Green Bay Packers defense. 9 receptions on 11 targets for 184 receiving yards, and not 1, but 2 touchdowns, 35 half PPR points, and he's the number 1 wide receiver at the end of the week. But then week 2 up against the Eagles, we had the primetime Kirk Cousins experience where he just shits the bed. 12 targets, 6 receptions, 48 receiving yards, wide receiver 47. And then last week up against Detroit in a matchup that everyone, including myself, loved. 6 targets, 3 receptions, 14 receiving yards, 3 fantasy points, wide receiver number 85. But here, there is a very clear bounce back spot for Justin Jefferson up against the New Orleans Saints defense that has not been as good as most people would have believed going into the season. Entering into the season, I thought the Saints had a great defense. They're not looking so great right now. I definitely think Justin Jefferson could finish as a top 5 wide receiver at the end of the week. Next up, we move to wide receiver number 4, A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles, going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I'm going to use a narrative that I love in fantasy football. It's the baby narrative. A.J. Brown just had a child. So now A.J. Brown is going to 100% mortal lock of the century, bet your fucking house, take out a second mortgage on your house because this shit is cashing. A.J. Brown is going to score a touchdown because he just had his kid, and in the end zone, he's going to hit the rockabye baby fucking celebration. A.J. Brown will find pay dirt. He's going to have an excellent game in the name of his brand new child. Last week up against the Commanders, 10 targets, 5 receptions, 85 receiving yards, and a tug, 17 fantasy points. Wide receiver number 13, 2 weeks thus far this season inside of the top 14 in half PPR. I think he easily gets it done this week up against the Jaguars, and the Jaguars are also sneaky pretty good. They just beat the Chargers, so they may be able to cause this to be a back and forth game, which will lead to Jalen Hurts having to throw the ball even more. At number 5, we have Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Denver Broncos. We have seen thus far this season, every single game Davante Adams has scored a touchdown, but despite that, he hasn't really been all that great aside from week 1, where up against the Chargers, he had 17 targets, 10 receptions, 141 receiving yards, 1 touchdown, 25 fantasy points, and he was the wide receiver 3 at the end of the week. His last 2 games, he's finished outside of the top 32, wide receiver 32 and wide receiver 46. Well, I guess technically he didn't fall outside of the top 32 last week, but you get the fucking point, right? Wide receiver 32 isn't ideal. A lot of those upper echelon wide receivers last week in fantasy football were disasters. A complete disaster. Davante Adams is still getting the targets. This team is 0-3. The Denver Broncos aren't looking that hot either. If there was ever a game where there was going to be a very high point total for both of these teams, the Broncos and the Raiders, it would be right here going toe-to-toe up against each other. So I'm not worried about Davante Adams one bit. At number 6, we have Michael Pittman Jr. of the Indianapolis Colts going up against the Les Titans, the Tennessee Titans, on Sunday. In week number 1, Michael Pittman went absolutely insane. 13 targets, 9 receptions, 121 receiving yards, 1 touchdown, 23 fantasy points. He was the wide receiver 5. At the end of the week, he missed week 2 up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Lucky for him because they got the shit kicked out of him in that game. Last week up against the Chiefs in that win, 9 targets, 8 receptions, 72 yards, 11 fantasy points, wide receiver number 36. Up against the Tennessee Titans, that's offense really turned things around. I was thinking, maybe Tannehill, aka Ryan Tanny Fraud, is going to get benched. Things aren't looking the greatest, and now they're looking pretty decent, so this could be a sneaky high-scoring game. Again, I'm not saying it's going to be, but it could be. Michael Pittman Jr. and Jonathan Taylor are the really only players on this team that I want to be starting, and I do feel very comfortable starting Michael Pittman going forward. At number 7, we have Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the Kansas City Chiefs on Sunday Night Football. Week 1 up against the Dallas Cowboys, he finishes inside of the top 20 at the wide receiver position as wide receiver 16. In week 2 up against the Saints, he gets in that fight with Marshawn Lattimore, finishes as wide receiver 51, but what do you really expect if he gets ejected during the game? He misses week 3, obviously, because of what happened against the Saints, but now he's back. Seems like Godwin's going to miss. Julio Jones seems like a true game time decision. They really don't have that many people to throw the ball to. I understand Tampa Bay Tom Brady has looked like he's in a bit of a slump right now. Maybe the fact that Giselle wants to divorce his ass and she's going to leave with half is really worrying Tom Brady. But at the end of the day, I think eventually all things are going to start clicking for Tom Brady. Will it be this week up against the Kansas City Chiefs? Maybe, maybe not. But eventually things will click. And without Chris Godwin, you just kind of have to roll out Mike Evans and assume that he could easily finish inside of the top 10. And he's a touchdown machine. He scored a touchdown in week number 1. I think he could find pay dirt here up against the Chiefs. To close out the top 8, we got Cortland Sutton of the Denver Broncos going up against the Las Vegas Raiders in Viva Las Vegas. Inside of the top 3 weeks, he finished inside of the top 24 twice in half PPR. Week number 1, wide receiver number 37. His targets have increased after week 1, getting only 7. Then in week 2 up against the Texans, 11. Week 3 up against the 49ers, he has 10. Now again, this Denver Broncos defense has been an embarrassment. A nationwide embarrassment. And nationwide is not on their side because they don't look great. Nathaniel Hackett is seeing a lot of scrutiny right now, and he deserves it. He deserves the scrutiny because this team is a fucking disaster. So are the Raiders. This game, both defenses not looking the best. This game does have a lot of makings to potentially be high scoring. Courtland Sutton appears to be the number one receiver on this team right now. Maybe Jerry Jeudy comes from out of nowhere like an RKO for Randy Orton and absolutely eviscerates the value of Courtland Sutton. But right now, I honestly don't see that happening. So Courtland Sutton, wide receiver number 8 in fantasy football this week. It definitely looks like some guys are ranked very high, but they weren't actually ranked super high going into the week because, like I said at the beginning of the video, the Dolphins and the Bengals already played, and those are like 4 wide receivers that you could have easily have ranked inside of the top 12. Now we move to wide receivers 9 through 16, headlined by CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys, going up against the Washington Commanders this week. 3 weeks in a row with over 10 targets, 11, 11, and 12 in the last 3 games. Last week up against the Giants in prime time on Monday night in MetLife, 8 receptions, 87 receiving yards, and a score, 19 fantasy points, wide receiver number 7. This week he gets the Commanders, who are starting to look more and more like a dumpster fire. Now, Wentz miraculously starts the season off on fire. And I'm not just talking about his hair. The man was on fire, and then he starts to pitter off. And this is what we're used to with Wentz, right? Maybe he has a couple of good games, but then eventually Wentz is going to Wentz. Now, the Dallas Cowboys obviously are without Dak. Dak could return next week up against the LA Rams. Not the best matchup for him, as he could get his shit absolutely eviscerated by Aaron Donald, but he might want to come back. Cooper Rush has been good for CeeDee Lamb. He's been decent the last 2 games with Mr. Cooper Rush under center, so I'm going to continue to rely on CeeDee Lamb. Obviously, I'd be a lot more comfortable with Dak under center, but right now, CeeDee Lamb is definitely a start-worthy wide receiver and a top 10 guy in my rankings. At number 10, closing out the top 10, we have Hollywood Brown of the Arizona Cardinals going up against the Carolina Panthers this week. Now, right now, Hollywood Brown is listed as questionable ahead of Sunday's action up against the Panthers. Brown popped up on the injury report on Friday, where he logged a limited practice. He should still be good to play, should still be good to go, but still up in the air, right? Don't lock this one in. Make sure you pay attention on Sunday. Make sure you check out the Sunday stream at 11:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I talk about a lot of these injuries. Now, this game's at 4:05, but I'm thinking we have a better idea as we get closer to 4:05 on Sunday. Once it becomes, the morning, I think we'll have a better idea on if Hollywood Brown ends up playing or not. And if we don't, I'll tweet it out on Twitter at NotoriousFNTSY if he ends up not being able to play. So I have been pretty shocked about Hollywood Brown, because when the Cardinals brought in Hollywood Brown, I thought that they brought him in to be this deep down the field burner, which he was in Baltimore. But it turns out I was absolutely fucking wrong, and this team wants to use him like he's Michael Thomas. 17 targets, 14 receptions, 140 receiving yards, no touchdowns, 21 fantasy points. Wide receiver number 3 up against the LA Rams last week. He did that against the Rams. Imagine what he's going to do if he is force-fed the ball up against the sorry-ass Carolina Panthers. This could be an amazing game out of Hollywood as long as he's able to play. At number 11, we have Christian Kirk of the Jacksonville Jaguars going up against the Philadelphia Eagles in Philadelphia. Now, in any other matchup, I would have Christian Kirk ranked significantly higher. The reason why he's only wide receiver 11 is because this Eagles defense might be the best defense in all of the National Football League. Now, they haven't faced the craziest opponents. It's not like they've went up against the Chiefs or one of the other better teams in the NFL. They haven't done that yet, but they do look legit, and this is a revenge game for Mr. Doug Peterson. 3 games in a row with solid production out of Christian Kirk. Wide receiver 19 in week 1 against the Commanders. Week 2 up against the Colts, wide receiver 7. Last week up against the Chargers, wide receiver number 14. We have yet to see him have that top 5 truly dominant performance, but he's been seeing a very solid target share in this offense week in and week out. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are legit. I don't think they're pretenders. I think they're a legitimate team that is going to be good this year. So their number 1 wide receiver, with how good Trevor Lawrence has been looking, you definitely want to play him. Next up, we move to wide receiver number 12. And I've talked about this a little bit this week. I definitely went in depth into this when I was talking about the wide receiver starter sit video earlier on in the week, that Deebo Samuel has been a real sneaky boy, because this motherfucker literally has went under the radar. He's gone up against the Rams this week, Monday Night Football, and you would think, oh, even now that Jimmy Garoppolo's back, he's going to see more rushes. He's going to be better, and he's actually not doing very good at all. Wide receiver 28, 25, and 39 in the last 3 weeks. No bueno, as they say, right? That's no bueno. That's not good at all. It's terrible. What the fuck is happening, Deebo Samuel? We drafted you in like the second round for a reason. Now he still has the play in him, so I'm not just going to take him, dribble him around, throw him out the fucking window and tell you not to start Deebo Samuel anymore, because that would be crazy. But is the red flag starting to come up? Am I starting to panic? Yes. Yes, I am. Wide receiver number 13, Diontae Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers, going up against the Jumbo Jets on Sunday. Hopefully he doesn't go up against Sauce Gardner, because Sauce Gardner has looked really good. Both of these teams haven't had a lot of time of possession, both under 30 minutes per game. So one of these teams is finally going to get over that hump of averaging more than 30 minutes of offense in a game, which would be great for Diontae Johnson. He's the clear number one option on this team. They have Pickens, who makes that crazy catch on Thursday Night Football. They have Chase Claypool, the king of hitting the crazy dance moves on third down when you need to spike the ball. But Diontae Johnson is just clearly the guy. He's that dude for the Steelers, and even up against the Jets, maybe Sauce Gardner, I still want to rely on him. Now, he's yet to score a touchdown. He's yet to have a huge game, but 12, 10, and 11 targets in the first 3 games. He's bound to break out when you're getting that many targets, so I think Diontae Johnson has his best week yet here as my wide receiver number 13. At number 14, we have Drake London. Drizzy Drake London, that is of the Atlanta Falcons, going up against the Cleveland Browns this week. 3 solid games out of the rookie Drake London last week up against Seattle in a game that I really thought he would have a much better performance. Again, he didn't shit the bed. He didn't play bad. I just thought he could play better against Seattle. 6 targets, 3 receptions, 54 receiving yards, a tug, 13 fantasy points, and 23 at wide receiver finish at the end of the week. Now, you better be careful getting a tug near Cleveland, because you might run into a quarterback on the Browns. But at the end of the day here, I think that Drake London is in for a good spot. He seems like a very safe player week in and week out because of the target share. 6 targets was actually the least amount he got on the season. Week 2 up against the Rams, 12 targets. Week 1 up against the Saints, 7 targets. While they have Kyle Pitts, this crazy freak athlete of a man that he is, it seems like they don't want to fully commit to him. They want to commit to Drake London, and that's great for Drake London. And this matchup up against the Cleveland Browns has sneaky high scoring upside potential. Wide receiver number 15, we got Mike Williams of the LA Chargers going up against the Houston Texans in Houston. Now, reading off his wide receiver finishes at the end of each week describes the Mike Williams experiment, or the Mike Williams, not experiment, like he's a fucking experiment. No, the Mike Williams experience perfectly, to a T. Wide receiver 102 week 1. Week 2, wide receiver 8. Week 3, wide receiver 46. So there's going to be the highest of highs with Mike Williams, where this guy takes a dump on your opponent's chest and just smears it around and laughs at him. Then there's going to be games where Mike Williams takes that shit and he smeared it on your wall and writes, ha ha ha, like he's the fucking Joker or something. He's the Joker. And it's crazy because every week you never know what to do with him. You are always going to start him because of the upside, but you never know what you're going to get. Up against the Texans without Keenan Allen, with a banged up Justin Herbert the pervert, I think Mike Williams does just fine. His upside's immense. He could be the number 1 receiver at the end of the week, but he also might kick you directly in the penis and finish as like wide receiver 46. But that's just the gamble you take with Mr. Magic Mike Williams. Wide receiver 16, closing out the top 16. We've got Amari Cooper of the Cleveland Browns going up against the Atlanta Falcons. Back-to-back games inside of the top 10. Now, these might be Mickey Mouse top 10 finishes because he did it up against the Jets and the Pittsburgh Steelers. But this week, he's got another Mickey Mouse cupcake matchup up against the Atlanta Falcons. So I think he gets it done yet again, finishing inside of the top 24. Definitely. Could he finish inside the top 10? For sure. For sure. I'm just not too sure how much I trust Jacoby Brissett. He played amazing on Thursday. But again, I'm just not too sold on that. But back-to-back games of over 10 targets, over 100 yards in both of them. I think we need to start trusting Amari Cooper a lot more. Now we move on to wide receiver 17 through 24. Wide receiver 17 right now, Brandon Cooks of the Houston Texans going up against the LA Chargers. Now, the reason why you drafted Brandon Cooks in fantasy football, or why I would have drafted Brandon Cooks in fantasy football, is because I want that safety net in my roster. The guy that is basically like strapping 3 Trojans to your roster. It's very safe. He's never going to go off and have this top 5 game and carry your team on his back like maybe a Mike Williams, but he's going to be more reliable. He's going to be a guy that's a top 32 receiver every single week, most likely top 24, finish inside like the top 18, not be super sexy, but hey, he was a guy that was in your lineup all the time, and he just helped you win by being ultra consistent. This year, though, not very consistent. Wide receiver 17, 52, and 78. He's been getting the targets 12, 10, and 7 in the last 3 games. So something's bound to change for Cooks. It's not like his skill set has fallen off the edge of the earth. Davis Mills hasn't looked the best. But again, I'm not super concerned with Brandon Cooks yet. I definitely would roll him out this week. Wide receiver number 18. This is where we get into some of the more risky scenarios here, right? With Gabe Davis. Like, if you want to start Gabe Davis over Brandon Cooks, I wouldn't be mad at you. I get why you'd want to do it, right? Gabe Davis right now questionable with the ankle injury. Davis was limited on Friday, but he told the media that he will play. So is he even fully healthy? Last week, he definitely wasn't fully healthy up against the Dolphins, but in week 1, when he was fully healthy, he destroyed the Rams defense. 5 targets, 4 receptions, 88 receiving yards, a tug, 17 fantasy points, wide receiver 12 in half PPR. Again, I love this matchup. My mouth is salivating on this matchup up against the Baltimore Ravens. I just slightly worry that that injury is going to hamper him. That, hey, the fact that he has an ankle injury could be the reason why he's not that top 12 finisher. So right now, again, I'm not mad at Gabe Davis. I'm not saying to sit him, but I'm not expecting that huge boom that he could have if he was fully healthy. Wide receiver number 19, my boy Rashad Master Bateman, wide receiver 1. Not wide receiver 1. In weeks 1 and 2, he was a top 24 wide receiver. Last week, he was 1 spot off of being very nice with wide receiver 69. He was wide receiver 68. He did see his lowest amount of targets up against the Patriots, but the Patriots defense was, what I talked about last week, they're kind of a disaster matchup for Mr. Rashad Master Bateman. This week, they get the Bills. I think Rashad Bateman wets his beak again and has a pretty solid game. Again, I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I do believe that the Ravens are going to be playing from behind, and I think that Lamar Jackson's going to let that motherfucker fly and throw a couple of deep balls to Mr. Rashad Master Bateman, so I definitely like him in this game, and I think he bounces back from a very poor performance up against the Patriots. Wide receiver number 20, we've got Devontae Smith. Now, week number 1, I was starting to panic on Devontae Smith, but week number 2, he started to play a little bit better, right? Week 1, he goes 4 for 0, 4 targets, 0 receptions against Detroit. Not good. Week 2 up against Minnesota in that Monday Night Football matchup that everyone just enjoyed watching, right? Everyone loved that game. 7 targets, 7 receptions, 80 yards. But week 3, he had his coming out party. 12 targets, 8 receptions, 169 receiving yards, a tug, 27 fantasy points, and the wide receiver numero uno, wide receiver number 1 at the end of the week. I fully expect the Slim Reaper to continue with that positive momentum and play great yet again up against the Jaguars. There are going to be games, though, where Goddard gets his and Brown gets his and Smith has a worse game. But right now, I think you want to continue to ride this hot streak and rely on Devontae Smith. Before we move to wide receiver number 21, though, I would like to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor of today's video. They've been underneath me this whole time. Underdog Fantasy. Are your best ball teams already shit in the bed? Are they shit out of luck? Are they cooked? Did you deal with a lot of injuries? That's okay, though, because all you got to do is head on over to Underdog Fantasy to resurrect them in their Best Ball Resurrection Tournament, week 6 through 17. The entry fee is only $10, with $500,000 in prizes, $100K going to first place. All you got to do is draft your team. That's it. Don't have to worry about waivers. Don't have to worry about staying up on Tuesday, trying to do waivers for a million leagues. You don't have to worry about trades because there's no trades, and you don't even have to worry about setting your lineup because Underdog will automatically give you your best score at the end of each week of the season. Underdog also features daily and best ball contests for the MLB, NBA, PGA, and NHL, so you can get action all year long. All you got to do is click on the link in the video description or use promo code Stokastic to get a first match deposit bonus of up to $100 on Underdog. So you deposit $100, they'll gift you an additional $100, which is 10 free entries into that Best Ball Resurrection Tournament. They also offer contests for the regular Sunday slate drafts. There's Sunday Night Football drafts, Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football already passed, but there's going to be Thursday Night Football next week, and you can do Thursday Night Football drafts as well. Make sure you guys do check that out. Wide receiver number 21, Garrett Wilson up against the Steelers. Now look, I am always honest when I talk about things. In fantasy football, I will call a spade a spade. I'm worried about Garrett Wilson. Not just worried, like, I'm a little bit worried. No, this is like, I am very worried. The upside is there. We saw him go wide receiver 6 up against Cleveland. He had 11 targets against Cincy last week. The issue is that he's going from cool Joe Flacco to Zach Wilson, the MILF Hunter. Now, realistically, Zach Wilson is more than likely the superior quarterback to Joe Flacco. More than likely. But we also have to understand that Zach Wilson might just force feed the ball to Elijah Moore. So Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, these guys that have looked great worry me. So if you're worried like me, maybe you want to play things safe, you can go with Curtis Samuel over Garrett Wilson. I feel like Garrett Wilson has a little bit more upside because of the matchup, but I do think Garrett Wilson is not as safe as he's been the last couple of weeks. Next up, we move to wide receiver number 22 with Curtis Samuel of the Washington Commanders going up against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, the Dallas Cowboys defense is tough. They've been good all season. Even in that game, week 1 up against the Bucs, they looked really good. So, up against the Commanders, they're a little bit deflated like a football in Indianapolis a couple years ago. I'm a little bit worried. I mean, Curtis Samuel was still fine in that game. His lowest scoring finish by far, week 1 against the Jags, wide receiver 17. Week 2 up against Detroit, wide receiver 12. Last week, wide receiver 42. But he still saw similar volume. I think he bounces back. But again, this matchup just isn't as ideal. The next guy to talk about here is his teammate, F1 Scary, Terry McLaurin. Now, the fact that you drafted Terry McLaurin higher than Curtis Samuel, and I have Curtis Samuel ranked higher than Terry McLaurin, sucks. It does. If you have both of these guys, I would suggest trading one of them so you don't have to do the mental gymnastics every week and figure out which one to start, because I do think eventually Terry McLaurin will start hitting at a better rate. He's yet to finish inside of the top 20. Wide receiver 25 in week 1, week 2, wide receiver 37, week 3 up against the Eagles, wide receiver 21. He's yet to have that really big game, but his targets have ramped up every single game. Week 1, 4, week 2, 8, and then 9 in week number 3. Again, I don't love this matchup up against Dallas, but based upon, again, how many wide receivers were jammed inside of the top 12 that already played, you kind of end up with Terry McLaurin ranking inside the top 24. Next up, we got Chris Olave. Now, Chris Olave is also in a scenario where I'm starting to panic. Now, he has looked really good. The air yards model tells you to get on your 2 knees and suck off Chris Olave because he's seeing a lot of targets. He's getting a lot of air yards. But now you go from the air yard king and famous Jameis Winston to Andy Dalton. And I don't even think Andy Dalton's going to be playing a shit ton. I think we're also going to be seeing Taysom Hill. So you mix those things together, and unlike the Powerpuff Girls, you don't get sugar, spice, and everything nice. You get, I don't know, what's something that's incredibly bad? I use kick in the cock all the time. You get kicked in the ass, okay? That's what happens when Taysom Hill and Andy Dalton are on the team. Now, again, Olave is incredibly talented, so I'm not going to count him out, but this is no bueno compared to what could have happened with famous Jameis Winston at the helm. Wide receiver number 25, the king of TikTok himself, Mr. Corvette, Juju Smith-Schuster of the Kansas City Chiefs, going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Sunday in Tampa Bay. Week number 3 was his best performance in half PPR on the year. 8 targets, 5 receptions, 89 receiving yards, 11 fantasy points, wide receiver 34 on the week up against the Indianapolis Colts. Eventually, I feel like one of these games, Juju's just bound to pop off, right? One of these games, it's bound to happen. I'm not sure it's going to happen up against the Bucs defense, but Juju really does seem like the clear number 1 receiver on the team. Obviously, they still have Travis Kelce, who's going to be seeing a ton of targets, but I think Juju's their guy. I think eventually he's going to start popping off. Just don't know when that's going to quite happen. Next up, we move to wide receiver number 26, Romeo Doubs of the Green Bay Packers, going up against the Patriots this week. 8 for 8 for 73 yards and a tug, 17 fantasy points, wide receiver 12, up against the Bucs last week. This matchup definitely better when compared to up against the Bucs, but the Patriots, again, aren't the most ideal matchup for any team. Now, my biggest worry here is that the Patriots are with Brian Hoyer, whose real name is Axel. He's actually Axel Hoyer, and I think if he went with Axel, he'd probably be a better quarterback. But without Mac Jones, like the Patriots offense doesn't strike fear into anyone. This could be a game where Aaron Rodgers just hands the ball off or dumps the ball off to Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon 7,000 times and they get out of there winning by 14 points. Because Brian Hoyer doesn't scare me at all. Not even remotely. So I think that hurts the upside of Dubes. Now, maybe Rodgers wants to hit that discount double check a couple times and just jam his cock down the throat of the Patriots. Maybe that's the case. But right now, I just don't love the matchup, really. Wide receiver 27, Tyler Lockett. Had to move Tyler Lockett up after the start-sit wide receiver video because it is really clear that right now, Geno Smith, let Geno cook, is really targeting Tyler Lockett, even though last year he's seen more in favor of Metcalf, and week 1 that was the case as well. Back-to-back weeks with top 30 finishes with 11 targets and 9 receptions in both games, 107 yards in week 2, 76 yards in week number 3 up against the Falcons. Now, this was a game up against the Detroit Lions that I really liked because I thought, Amon-Ra St. Brown, okay, maybe DeAndre Swift's not going to play, but St. Brown's going to play. He's out. He's another one of those guys that was ranked really highly, and he's not going to play. Michael Thomas also not playing this week, so there's a lot of guys that I really liked that are not playing. So up against the Lions, this could have been a really high-scoring game. Maybe it still will be because baby Chark, baby Chark, and Jamal Williams are going to feast like Thanksgiving dinner. Maybe that's possible. But the writing on the wall isn't as clear. I think Tyler Lockett will be just fine. I got to put some respect on his name because he's been a top 30 receiver the last 2 weeks. But Geno Smith is still his quarterback. Wide receiver 28, DJ Chark. Now, if anyone saw that clip of DJ Moore in his locker room, it seemed like DJ Moore wanted to just stab Baker Mayfield in the face. And that's like, I don't even know if that's like a bad, like, that's a kind way to put it. Like, it just doesn't look good for DJ Moore. Like, for years, I blamed the quarterback in Carolina for DJ Moore. DJ Moore's always getting the targets. He's always fucking open, but he can't get the ball. And I'm like, okay, Baker Mayfield, look, you're not the fucking Messiah. You're not the second coming of Tom Brady, but you're good enough. You're good enough to get it done. But no, DJ Moore's value gets fucking catapulted off the edge of the earth like what Christopher Columbus believed what would happen if he sailed too far. This is embarrassing. This is a fucking disaster. What the fuck is happening? Baker Mayfield sucks ass. And I was a Baker Mayfield defender. I thought Baker Mayfield was going to take DJ Moore to the promised land. Instead, DJ Moore is ass. And it's not his fault. It's not his fault. I don't even want to rank him inside the top 32. I don't even want to fucking play him. The upside's there up against the Cardinals. Maybe he does hit. Maybe Baker heard what he said. He's like, fuck, maybe I got to get things together. Maybe I got to actually throw the ball to DJ Moore. Maybe Christian McCaffrey misses this game. That's possible. And maybe DJ Moore just gets force-fed the fucking ball. But man, Baker Mayfield pisses me off. Wide receiver number 29, Brandon Ayuk. Great game up against the Broncos. Last week, Broncos country, let's ride. 8 targets, 3 receptions, 39 receiving yards, 1 touchdown, 11 fantasy points, wide receiver 33. But wide receiver scoring was down league-wide last week, so not the greatest of performances. And Jimmy Garoppolo legitimately looks like fucking Stevie Wonder in the pocket. I can't believe this man is a starting quarterback in the National Football League. Now, as a Dolphins fan, the fact that Tua Tagovailoa is hurt and might not come back all year, I would happily have Jimmy G be the starting quarterback of my team, but that's because Jimmy G can win with this offense that we have. The 49ers have a good offense too, but no one's really performing that well. Brandon Ayuk looked like he was in for a huge year with Trey Lance, like out of training camp. All the positivity towards that connection, it looked like some 5G LTE shit. Looked like an excellent connection. But now we're sitting here week 4, and Brandon Ayuk still isn't really all that great. Now, again, is he start worthy? Yes. But up against the Rams, I mean, I know Debo is going to get the Jalen Ramsey treatment, but this just isn't that ideal of a game. Wide receiver 30, Jerry Jeudy up against the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't want to scream Raiders for like the 5th time in this video and blow your fucking eardrums out, but we talked negatively about Jerry Jeudy. Maybe he is the guy, though. This is an epiphany I had earlier today. While Sutton's been dominant, Jerry Jeudy's still good. Like, he had a great game week 1, week 2, week 3, kind of fades away, he's banged up. But again, this matchup against the Raiders is mouth-watering, salivating. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So I think Jerry Jeudy could sneakily get it done this week. Not saying he's a must-start receiver, but I think I need to start giving him a little bit more credit, because if you said after week 1 up against Seattle, it looked like Sutton was finished and Jeudy was the guy. Wide receiver 31, DK Metcalf, 12 targets last week, 5 receptions, wide receiver 18, 15 fantasy points, a tug, 64 receiving yards. Again, I want to like DK Metcalf. I want to like him because he's good, because he's a big-bodied receiver. He's basically like shipped out of those Greek statues. He's so fucking good. He's so talented. He's fast as fuck. He's huge. The problem is that Geno's his quarterback. It sucks. It really does. My read on DK is that he's a good player. This matchup against the Lions isn't as good as I thought it was going to be. He's all right, I guess. Wide receiver 32 to close things out, Mr. Irrelevant. Adam Thielen finally has a good game in week 3 up against the Lions. 8 targets, 6 receptions, 61 receiving yards, a tug, 15 fantasy points, wide receiver number 17. When it comes to Adam Thielen, I'm not uber excited to start him in this game up against the Saints, but there's a lot worse options than him, and it seems like he's getting more targets. Like week 1, it seems like he was just iced out by Kirk Cousins, but week 2, 7 targets, week 3, 8 targets. Again, the Saints defense isn't as good as they're made out to be. My only real worry with Adam Thielen and this whole Minnesota Vikings team, the Minnesota Vikings, is that, look, this isn't technically a primetime game because it's not at night. And it's not even at night in London. It's at like 4:15. So this is prime time for Kirk Cousins not to shit the bed. But maybe since he had to hop on a jet, maybe there's some jet lag. And technically it's kind of a primetime game. So maybe Kirk Cousins has a bad game. I don't think he will. But that is something I have worried about. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. Again, if you did end up enjoying, make sure that like button down below as well as that subscribe button. It would help me out a ton. If you do want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. And make sure you check out our sponsor of today's video, Underdog Fantasy. I love you guys all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your guys' day. And again, if you have any questions, make sure you ask them down below in the comments section. Love you guys so much. Have a great rest of your guys' day. And as always, good boy.